Kafka is the new 5-star Nihility Lightning character with a special ability to force immediate dot damage. One of the reasons she can be a must-pull is because she is a very future-proof and strong character if you plan to build dot team, as she is able to double any sort of dot damage. Another reason is she is also a desirable character to build from an F2P's perspective, as she usually requires attack percentage stats for her relic pieces and planar ornaments, which means that if you're farming the same set for another character, for example, getting attack body piece or a lot of attack percentage substats while farming for crit rate or crit damage piece is not as bad because Kafka needs it. This means less grinding and you're able to utilize more of the relic and planar pieces you farm. Let's start discussing her build by talking if she really needs her signature light cone and if it is worth pulling. There are a lot of analyses on this, and strictly speaking, her E1 is better in terms of damage, but there is one situation where her light cone becomes a very solid option, and that is when you pair her with Luca and Sampo, but you do not have two other damage light cones. For Luca, the best 4-star light cone is either Fermata or Goodnight Sleep Well, depending on your superimposition. For Sampo, the best 4-star light cone is Eyes of the Prey. Of course, you can use the free Silver Wolf's light cone or Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat for either Luca and Sampo, but you will lose out on damage on both options. Just so you know, Luca and Sampo are her best teammates for the time being because Luca's bleed deals 338% of his attack at level 10, and Sampo's wind shear deals 260% of his attack at 5 stacks at level 10. The choice to pull E1 or light cone is ultimately yours, but in my personal opinion, even though her E1 is objectively better, I would still pull for her signature light cone, but that is my personal preference because I like collecting as many different 5 stars as possible. To give you a reference, a superimposed 5 Fermata on Kafka is about 14% worse than superimposed 1 Patience is All You Need, while her E1 gives around 16% more damage compared to an E0 Kafka. As for her Trace's prioritization, you should aim to level her ultimate followed by skill followed by talent. Her ultimate is given the most priority as the bulk of her own damage comes from her shock dot, and her ultimate increases that dot multiplier up to 290% at level 10 and 224.75% at level 8. Next should be her skill because it increases the forced dot damages multiplier up to 75% at level 10 and 71.25% at level 8. She also uses her skill every turn, so the additional 20% damage multiplier at level 10 compared to level 8 adds up. Her talent is given the lowest priority because it doesn't affect the dot damage she inflicts and is only a direct damage multiplier increase to her follow-up attack, with the multipliers being 140% at level 10 and 115.5% at level 8. If you haven't unlocked the major traces from Character Ascension, a general rule of thumb is to always upgrade them first. Kafka's best relic set is the lightning set because she uses her skill at her every turn, but if you're saving your Trailblaze power for Traces or XP books, you can use the 2-piece Musketeer set you get from Echoes of War with a 2-piece Messenger traversing Hackerspace because they provide speed and attack percentage, both two of the most important stats for Kafka. For the relic piece itself, you want speed boots and attack percentage body piece. You don't want crit rate or crit damage on the body piece as the main stat because most of the bulk of her damage comes from her dot, and dots don't crit. They scale with attack. For your reference, her kit that can crit, like skill and ultimate, only make up for about 30% of her overall damage, while the rest of her kit, like her dot that does not crit, makes up for about 70% of her overall damage. Her best planar ornament set is definitely the Space Sealing Station because of the sheer amount of attack percentage it gives, and you want to aim for lightning damage boost, sphere piece, and attack percentage rope for most damage. As for the substats, you want to aim for speed and attack percentage. For her speed, you want to aim for an overall of 161 plus speed, which is more achievable with her signature light cone and messenger traversing hackerspace 2-piece effect, or a speed of either 134 or 148 if you're not using her signature light cone and messenger 2-piece effect. You'll have to experiment a bit because her speed will definitely increase the number of turns she can take, which will in turn proc more forced dot damage, but the dot damage also depends on her teammates' overall build. If you want a more in-depth explanation of speed calculation, check out my other video on it. Next, you want to have effect hit rate substats to help her land her debuffs, especially if you have her E1 to inflict dot increase debuff or her signature light cone to inflict erode. With her traces, you can get up to 18% effect hit rate, and with that much effect hit rate, your chances to land shock and her erode or dot increase debuff on an enemy with 40% effect resistance is around 92.04% and 70.8% respectively. Her chance of landing shock is very high, but if you have E1 or her light cone, you definitely want more effect hit rate. Team comp wise, Kafka is super versatile, but if you're building her for dot damage, you definitely want at least another dot character on your team. Her best team damage wise for the time being is Kafka, Sampo, Luca, and a preservation or an abundance character, preferably Japar, Luocha, or Bailu. This is also her squishiest team because Sampo and Luca also wants to focus on attack percentage and speed, so if you need more survivability depending on what defensive character you have, you can use the Fleetless Planar Ornament set for both Sampo and Luca, because they can provide one another additional 16% compared to Space Sealing Station's 24% attack and get some additional max HP stat. The rotation for this team is using Kafka's skill at her every turn, then reapplying Luca's bleed every 3 turns with his skill, and using either Sampo's skill for higher damage multiplier, or the defensive character's skill for healing, or for energy regen for their ultimate. As mentioned previously, you want either Fermata or Goodnight Sleep Well for Luca and Eyes of the Prey for Sampo if possible, but Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat is a good alternative for Luca, and Silverwolf's 4-star Light Cone is a good alternative for Sampo. If you don't want to build both Luca and Sampo because of resource constraint, you can also substitute one of them with Harmony characters like Asta or Tingyun. Asta or Tingyun is also usually a bit more tanky because their ideal build usually includes some HP or defensive stats on their Relic. Overall, Kafka is a must-pull character for anyone, be it free-to-plays or whales, if they plan to build a full-fledged dot team because of her ability to force immediate dots. Her ability to perform well solo with her own high shock damage, paired with her ability to utilize relics that are often not usable by other DPS characters, make her even more enticing for free-to-plays. But if you're not planning to build a dot team, I advise you to skip Kafka because that is where she shines. There are builds for Kafka using crit damage or crit rate to become a hyper carry, but as mentioned, you'll be losing out on a lot of attack percentage stat, which means less dot damage from her shock, which has the highest damage multiplier. You're better off building Blade or Zila as a hyper carry. That's all I have for an F2P Kafka's build. Let me know if you have any questions and subscribe for more guides. Also let me know if you'd like a detailed comparison of Patience is All You Need versus her other viable light cones.